everybody. I am super excited to be joined by Kathy Shanley today. We're going to be talking about all the fun stuff she's been contributing to Forbes.com. She's a writer, and of course, she's also the founder and CEO of Statice. Now, Kathy, for people that aren't familiar with your work, before we dive into the article that you contributed to Forbes that we're going to be discussing today, why don't you tell us a little bit about Statice and your background?
Great, Casey. It's so great to be back here and particularly to talk about a subject that I love, which is trust. So a little bit about me, Kathy Shanley. I spent 30 years in the C-suite, and then I decided that I wanted to combine that experience and share lessons from my 30 years in the C-suite with my passion for writing. And so I joined Forbes Coaches Council about a year ago. And since that time, I've written about 5 or 6 articles. And as you said, the next one coming up is on trust.
That's right. We're talking developing trust today in your organizations. And we will definitely link to the article in the description of today's podcast. But I want you to tell us about the 4 behaviors that are essential for building trust at work.
Yeah, so in this case, I'm talking primarily about the work of Charles Feltman in the Thin Book of Trust. The 4 behaviors are competency, reliability, care, and sincerity. And so we start out with competency is really the reason why you're hired. Okay. I hired you because I trust you have the skills to do the job. It's those other 3, the sincerity, the care, and the reliability that help elevate or maintain that trust throughout your career or your relationship with an organization.
Now, tell us about how these 4 behaviors differ from other qualities that are commonly associated with building trust.
Yeah, so whether you're talking about the Thin Book of Trust and those 4 qualities, or you're talking about the great work of Patrick Lencioni on the 5 behaviors of a team, what's really different is you can't just isolate one aspect of trust. So it's not simply having a lot of trust and someone's going to be transparent with you and then that someone has the best of intentions or that they're going to do what they said they're going to do. It's really all of it. So you have to look at it as a whole. And then from there, you want to then decide, okay, I now know where trust is strong. I now know which components of trust we're weak at. And then getting a plan together through coaching to develop that trust as a whole.
I think trust is key to so much. Trust is everything, but I'm curious about what the challenges are with instilling trust in today's modern, workplace. Tell us about that.
Yeah, people might hold back. They won't be completely willing to, popular term is vulnerable. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to tell you when they made a mistake. They might put a filter on in a conversation. The challenge with that is that you're not hearing everyone's voices and opinions. And we know that some of the greatest teams have to have that productive conflict, that conversation where you're talking about, I feel that this is the best way to go. Then you tell me you feel it's the best way to go. And then I'm open to your opinion. And then I'm open to say like, hey, I made a mistake.
Yes.
And we need to fix it.
Now, how can businesses incorporate these 4 behaviors into their day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so getting back to the components that I talked about before, the sincerity, the care, and the reliability. So oftentimes teams will start with, how do I build that team trust? And part of it is that showing that we are in this together. That's the components of care and sincerity. We're in this together. And so teams might have me come in and we start building a team alliance. And we talk about what is the atmosphere we want to create with each other? Okay. And they might say things like, I want us to communicate a lot. I want it to be fun. I want to have an environment where we are high in trust of each other, right? And then they'll move on from the alliance. They'll talk about, well, what are our challenges and how will we show up when there are challenges? And then last, how will we hold each other accountable when we're not meeting this agreement? So that's one aspect of building a team alliance. In some other companies, they might focus on things like delegation. Okay. And so that's the reliability piece of it. And so we work on building skills to delegate effectively, communicating the task, giving them context, and really being strong in walking away with common expectations for what the task is.
And how can we measure the success of our efforts to implement trust?
Yeah, so one of the greatest assessments that I love is actually the 5 behaviors work of Patrick Lencioni. So you can come in, team members take an assessment, and they start to get a feel for those individual components of trust that I talked about before. Like, how willing am I to openly talk about my concerns? Am I willing to admit my mistakes and whatnot? The great thing is then we can go back, whether it's 6 months or a year later, and we can do a comparison report. And that report will then show, like, where have we particularly done well? and where there's still opportunities for improvement for trust on this team.
And what are the long-term benefits when you do take the time to invest all this effort and resources into building trust? What can companies expect to do better?
Yeah, so, well, at the end of the day, if there's trust, we all know that there will be productive conflict, right? So like I talked about that before, we're willing to openly have a discussion about the different options, solutions, recommendations. And then when you have that open discussion, then we see a high level of buy-in and commitment from everybody, right? I had to say, all right, we didn't all have consensus, but I had a say, and I now trust that I'm going to work on this with others. And then you start to see a high level of accountability. And it's not just being accountable for myself, but that I trust this team. So if you, Casey, miss a deadline, I'm going to be willing to go to you and to talk to you about it. Like, hey, what happened? Where can I support you? And then at the end of the day, that drives the results.
Kathy, Shanley has been our guest. We're talking about building trust in organizations. Was there anything that you left out that you wanted to tell us about before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I would just love the opportunity to work with teams and individuals on trust and other issues. So visit my site, and I'd love to hear from you.
The website is thinkstatice.com. That's think-status.com to get in touch with Kathy, and also to read more of her Forbes articles. I highly recommend following her on all the social media platforms. And of course, we'll have links to those in the description of this episode. Thank you, Kathy, for your time.
Thank you.